Welcome. Give us 1 second to make sure everyone from the waiting room is getting in safely. Hello. Brilliant. I think that's about everyone. So welcome, guys. Welcome back. For those of you who have been here before, I recognize a couple of the names, so welcome back. And those who have not been here before, we are the Marine Environmental Education Center located out on Hollywood Beach, Florida. We are still closed to the public, unfortunately, but we really did want to provide some cool resources for the community, for those of you who are also still stuck indoors, something that could be really interesting and learn about a wide variety of marine science topics. So we started this really cool webinar series. So today we are lucky enough to be talking to Jessica Pate. She is from North Carolina and actually sailed all across the Atlantic Ocean and became a dive instructor, all along fostering a love of manta rays. We are very turtley focused here. If any of you guys have been to the MEEC before, we do have Captain, our green sea turtle, so we get very interested in our turtley friends, but we are really excited to learn a little bit about something different today. Those manta rays are super cool. If you guys have any questions, we do have everyone muted right now, just so you could more clearly hear Jessica. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to throw them into that chat. Oops, I think that we still need to make Jessica a host. So Christina, if you don't mind doing that, if you're here hanging out. Otherwise, throw questions in that chat. You could also do that little raise your hand emoji to try and get our attention if you need it. If you have technical difficulties, we are hanging out and we're happy to help virtually if we can. Otherwise, whenever you're ready, I think you are now co-host Jessica, so you could take it away.
All right. This up. All right, can everyone see that? All right, cool. So hi everyone, thanks for coming to join me today to learn about manta rays. I'm going to tell you about why they're my favorite animal, why I think they should be your favorite animal, and how I got into studying them, and what we've learned so far with our research about manta rays here in Florida. So one of the first things that people notice about manta rays is that they're really big. So the largest manta rays, so from one tip of their wing to the other tip of their wing, can be 7 to 8 meters. So that's like up to 25 feet across. So that would be about me 5 times with my arms spread out. So they're really, 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 really big. They're the largest ray that lives in the ocean. And you can see how big they are with this little tiny diver here. Her arm is about the size of the manta ray's pelvic fin. And this is an interesting sight. One thing you don't usually see with manta rays, well, manta rays first are part of a group of fish called elasmobranchs. So these include all the sharks and rays, and they differ from us in that instead of having a skeleton made of bones, they have a skeleton made of cartilage. So if you like touch the end of your nose, that's what their skeleton is made of, which is great because they're super bendy and it makes them really flexible and swim efficiently through the water. But one thing cartilage does not do is preserve very well. So this is a very rare sight to see. It would be a manta skeleton. You usually don't find these. But one thing that does preserve well from sharks and rays are their teeth. So manta rays have thousands of really tiny teeth just along their lower jaw. And their teeth are made of a similar material to what our teeth are made of, so that they will preserve and fossilize. And it's using this information, scientists have been able to figure out about how old manta rays are as a group. So manta rays have been around on Earth for about 5 million years, which might sound like a crazy long time, but in the terms of evolution, it is literally the blink of an eye. All of the sharks and rays, all of the elasmobranchs have been around for 400 million years. So manta rays are actually the newest to evolve out of all the sharks and rays. So they're kind of the youngest new kids on the block. And manta rays have all these tiny teeth, and they do not use them for eating. And we'll get back to what they use these teeth for. So you guys living in Florida, when you think of a ray, you might think of a typical kind of stingray. These are a very common species called a southern stingray that lives here in Florida. And these rays are adapted for life living on the bottom of the ocean. They're round and flat. They have their eyes on the top of their heads right here. Underneath their bodies is where their mouth is, so they can feed in the sand. And their gills are also underneath their body. That is why they had, you see these holes behind their eyes? These are called spiracles. And stingrays use this to pump water over their gills. When they're laying on their bottom, their gills are usually in the sand. They also have a stinging barb on their tail. This is why you should always do the stingray shuffle when you're at the beach. So always shuffle your feet when you're getting in the water, because they don't want to sting you. They'll only sting you if you step on them and they get surprised. So if you shuffle and let them know you're there. But this is to help them protect them from predators. So basically, these guys are adapted for living, eating, resting on the bottom. Manta rays are completely different. These guys are adapted to live life in the middle of the water column in the open ocean. They are always swimming. So they have more of a diamond-shaped body, which means they're more hydrodynamic. And they have eyes here on the side of their head, which helps them see all the way around, since other stingrays just need to look up since they're on the bottom, but mantas need to be able to see all the way around. They also have the little spiracles, but they don't really function anymore because they don't need them. In order to breathe, manta rays must keep swimming. So they never stop swimming. They keep swimming their whole entire lives. And by moving through the water, they're moving water across their gills, and that's how they breathe. And manta rays do not have a stinging barb like the stingrays, so these guys can't hurt you. And one of the most noticeable characteristics of manta rays are these fins in front of their face. These are called cephalic fins, and they use these in feeding. So when manta rays are feeding, they unroll these cephalic fins and they use it as like a funnel to funnel water into their mouth. And what's in that water are little teeny tiny creatures called plankton. And plankton just means something that drifts with the current. So these are really tiny, like little shrimps and crabs and stuff that they eat. And it gets trapped in these structures in their gills called gill rakers. So they move through the water, all the plankton water goes in their mouth, all the stuff in the water gets trapped in their gill rakers. They expel the rest of the water out, and then they swallow the food, and that's how manta rays eat. And when they're done eating, they can roll their cephalic fins right back up, and this is why in a lot of places they'll be called devil rays, because the little horns on their head look like devils. And here's a video to show one manta ray rolling up his fins, or his cephalic fins. So we'll actually see this a lot when we're in the water with them. Sometimes they'll unroll and roll their cephalic fin, like in reaction to a diver being in the water. So it's likely they could be using this as some kind of communication with each other, but no one really knows that yet. And here's just a really cool video I want to show you of a manta ray. You can actually see her kind of moving her cephalic fins. And what's really interesting about this is really rare behavior to see from a fish. There's a snorkeler on the water, on the surface of the water taking this video. And manta rays will display curiosity towards humans and divers. They can get a better look at you. They have better vision from their bellies. So sometimes what we'll see is they'll turn upside down and just hover underneath us. They're so close to us that if we wanted to, we could reach down and rub their bellies. But why would a fish do this? Why would they exhibit curiosity towards humans? And one reason we think is that we think manta rays are really smart. Oh, I have to watch the rest of this video, but this is really cool. This is a female named Luna. Oh, nope. So yeah, manta rays are really smart. They have the largest brain of any fish. So they don't just have a big brain because they have a big body. They have a big brain for their body size. So this is usually an indicator of intelligence. So why do these big rays need to be smart? Why would they invest all this energy in having a big brain? Could it be because they, have to travel very long distances to find all the tiny food in the water? Well, if we examine that theory a little more closely, their cousins, the whale shark, they also feed on plankton, but their brain is really small. Their brain is 1/3 of the size of a manta ray, and their body is 10 times as big. So they're not quite as smart, although they are cute. One reason we think manta rays probably have large brains is because they're very social animals. And here's an extreme example of their social behavior. This is at a lagoon in the Maldives where hundreds of manta rays will get together to cooperatively feed. And this makes their feeding more efficient. Here is something called cyclone feeding, where they basically make a tornado of mantas in the water to concentrate all the plankton and create these like vortex currents. So they likely need to be smart to work together to do all of this. Yeah, so I have not been there to see that yet, but hopefully one day I will be able to. Another way in which manta rays are social is with reproduction. So first, I'm going to give you guys a little lesson on how to tell the difference between a boy and a girl manta ray. So if we look here at the pelvic fins, which are the fins on the bottom of the ray, we're looking for paired structures called claspers. So females do not have them and males do. So if you look here on your right, this is a female. She doesn't have anything else on her pelvic fins. And if you look here on your left, you can see these two organs that come off the pelvic fins, and these are claspers. And what's useful about the claspers is we can tell the relative age of a manta ray based on the size of these claspers. So if they're really tiny, like this one in picture A, they're going to be juvenile or baby manta rays. In B and C, they're probably more like teenager, subadult. And in picture D, you'll see these like rounded clasper glands, and they'll get really rigid and hard when they're adults, so calcified. That will be a fully adult male. And so when manta rays reproduce, usually what happens is there will be a single female, and then there will be lots of males following her, sometimes, up to 30. And what she does is she'll do evasive behaviors. She will flip, she will turn, And they will do this for hours and hours and hours, and all the males will follow her. And we don't know how she picks the winning one, but when she does, what happens is the male will grab onto her pelvic fin with his mouth. And this is why manta rays still have teeth. They can use that to grab on for mating, and will flip themselves over belly to belly and use their claspers to mate. Manta rays are negatively buoyant, which means they sink. So they stop swimming when they're reproducing. So after all these hours and hours of chasing, reproduction takes about 20 to 30 seconds, because once they start doing it, they start falling to the seafloor, and sometimes they've been seen to like crash into the sand or on the reef. And these scars will be left on the female's pectoral fin right here. So those are the scars left from the male's teeth. And so this is a way to tell if a female is an adult or not. If you see these scars, you know that she's been engaged in mating activity. Another way to tell if a female is mature is to see her pregnant. So they'll have these really big bellies that you'll see on the back and the underside. And manta rays are pregnant for an entire year. So they will be pregnant for 1 year, and then they will have one pup. So, and then they'll take 2 to 5 years off between each reproductive event. So if you do math, they're not having very many babies. They're putting lots and lots of energy into making one big baby. And does anyone have any guesses at, well, the babies are so big when they're in the uterus, they have to have their wings folded over their backs. So they're like a little manta ray burrito. And that's how they'll come out born. So does anyone have any idea how big a baby manta ray is? So baby manta rays are 6 feet across. So from wingtip to wingtip, so they are really, really, really big babies. And no one has ever witnessed a manta ray being born in the wild. The only way we know how big these babies are there's an aquarium in Japan where the mantas have been mating, and they've had 8 babies now. So they've been able to measure them. But yeah, so these guys, they're born really big, so they should have a high survival rate. That's why the mothers invest so much energy in making these large babies. And manta rays are considered to be vulnerable to extinction. This is on the IUCN Red List. And what vulnerable to extinction means is that means there's a high risk of an extinction if nothing is done. So this means that we need to act now and change change what's happening if we want mantas to be around in the next 100 years. And some of their threats include entanglement in fishing line. This happens a lot all over the world, and gill nets is really bad, and even like mooring lines. You can see this manta. Remember, if they get caught in something and can't keep swimming, they can't breathe and they will die. And this also can just impede their ability to feed and swim. There's also threats from coastal development, anything that's ruining the reefs that they live on. A big topic of discussion these days are microplastics. So, if you have a plastic bottle and it ends up in the ocean, it just breaks down and breaks down and breaks down into tinier and tinier and tinier pieces of plastic. And these plastics are the same size as the manta ray's food. So they found at one of our study sites in Indonesia, they found that manta rays are consuming 60 pieces of plastic an hour, and you can just see them feeding right through these huge garbage patches, and it's really sad. Climate change might also affect where they're able to live and affect their food. If the ocean gets too acidic, it'll ruin the shells of the stuff they feed on. And we also see them struck by boats. But by and large, the biggest threat to manta rays is fishing. Both people who are intending to catch manta rays and what's called bycatch, which means you accidentally catch something when you're fishing for something else. So this is the reason why they're vulnerable to extinction. And because, like I said earlier, you know, the moms invest all this time into having one baby. So if you fish these animals out, they can't replace their population very quickly. Their population grows very, very, very slowly. Yeah, and most of these pictures are from fish markets in Indonesia. And another driver of fishing for manta rays is what's called the gill trade. So remember I told you that manta rays have these structures in their gills that trap the plankton out of the water so that they can eat. These have become popular in Asian medicines, and they're used in a health tonic, which there's no scientific evidence for. That's kind of used as like a cure-all type of medicine, but they can fetch a very high price, like hundreds of dollars per pound, which if you're a poor fisherman somewhere is a lot of money. We're working on reducing that trade. Manta rays have been put on a lot of international treaties, like CITES, which is the Convention for International Trade of Endangered Species, which means that all these countries have to work together to make sure that trade either doesn't happen or is sustainable. So now I'm going to switch a little bit and talk a little bit about myself and how my path ended up to studying manta rays. Because I actually, after I got out of university at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I actually began studying sea turtles were my first jobs. And I studied sea turtles in, some of these pictures are in Costa Rica, in Honduras, or also in West Africa in a country called Ghana. And I also studied sea turtles in Florida. So this is a picture of me many, many years ago out on a beach. And what we do is we drive these ATVs up and down the beach and count the sea turtle tracks from the moms who came up to lay nests the night before. So we're out driving on the beach all day long. And sometimes I would look over into the ocean and I would see this giant black shadow swimming by, and I would be like, what on earth is that? And I'm a scuba diver, a marine biologist. I had never heard of anyone talk about there being manta rays in Florida, much less manta rays in 3 feet of water. So I convinced one of my friends to take me out on his boat, and this is back in 2010. And I found my very first manta ray. This is actually the picture of the manta ray. And what I showed you earlier with that upside down swimming behavior, when they're kind of checking you out, that's what that manta did to me that first time. And I kind of freaked out. Like, I don't even have pictures because I forgot how to use my camera because I was so stunned because I did not know that a fish would do that. And I was just completely hooked. And I went home, and a scientist, we use a Google called Google Scholar, and this is where scientific publications are. And I Googled manta ray Florida just to see if anyone had done any research. And to this day, what comes up is this. There's been one paper by a scientist at FWC who just says, I saw 3 manta rays in the Indian River Lagoon in the 1990s. But that's it. And this will actually be changing in August because we're having our very first paper come out. So I'm gonna have to find a new slide. But yeah, so I couldn't believe it's very rare as a scientist, especially living in here in Florida where there's so much research going on. to find like a large charismatic species like that no one knows anything about. There are a couple of very old publications from like 1916 from where people used to hunt manta rays. They were a popular game fish back in the day that people would harpoon and fight for hours and hours and hours. This is actually a picture of, does anyone know who this is? That's our president, Teddy Roosevelt, coming down to the Gulf Coast of Florida to spear some manta rays. You can see he has 2 manta rays right there. So this is some of the information that's out there. No one does this anymore, to my knowledge here. It would be illegal. But yeah, so this is the kind of stuff you can find. But my career took a little detour. I really wanted to study manta rays in grad school, and long story short, it didn't work out. So I went back to studying sea turtles. So this is me doing my grad school project. I always thought I'd be out diving on the reefs, doing something tropical. But in reality, I was in the lab all night long watching sea turtles swim in circles, which is the reality of science sometimes. And after I finished my graduate degree, I got a job working as a marine biologist and dive instructor on a sailboat where I spent a year sailing around the Caribbean, and we even crossed the Atlantic Ocean. And it was a really cool job. But when I finally moved back to Florida, I'd always been thinking about these manta rays in Florida and kind of praying that no one else started a project before I did. But I never really knew how to start a project. And I finally just decided to go for it. And when we moved back to Florida, my boyfriend and I just decided, can we even find them reliably? Like, we didn't even know. Yes, I had seen them from the beach, but like, can you design a whole study around them? Maybe there's like a couple that pass through every year. So in 2016, we just rented a boat and went out on our days off from work. And found that, yay, we could find them from a boat. That year, we saw mantas on about half the time we went out, and we identified 10 individuals. So I then started the Florida Manta Project, which is a project in collaboration with the Marine Megafauna Foundation. They're a wonderful organization studying manta rays and whale sharks all around the world. And what we do when we go out on a manta survey and look for manta rays is I will stand on my bow of my boat to get to the highest point. And actually now we've gotten a little more technologically savvy, and we're using drones a lot more, which makes it a lot easier to find things. But this is how we used to do it the old school way before technology. And basically, we're driving, our study area is between the St. Lucie Inlet and the Boynton Beach Inlet. So we're driving anywhere in these areas, and what we're looking for is these large black shapes. So I can tell you I've identified every manta-shaped rock in Palm Beach County, Florida. So you're looking for big black shapes that move. When we find one of those, we get in the water with them. And we're not scuba diving, we're just snorkeling or free diving, because usually they're in very shallow water. And this is the data we're trying to collect. One, we're trying to get an underwater photograph of their bellies, because each manta ray has a unique spot pattern on their belly. So it's like a fingerprint for us. So by getting in the water and getting a photo of this spot pattern, we can know who that individual is. We're also seeing if they're male or female, if they're over the sand or swimming over the reef, any anthropogenic impacts or injuries. And anthropogenic is just a big fancy word for something caused by humans. And as you can see, this manta ray has a bright, colorful fishing lure in her jaw. And then we also document any behaviors. Are they feeding? Did they breach? Any environmental conditions, and also any associated species, because big animals like this always have critters like these remoras traveling with them. And just a little note, because everyone thinks marine biology research is so glamorous, and I'm not going to deny I absolutely love it. But these pictures are what I put on social media because they're really beautiful. But a lot of time in the field, this is what it looks like. Because everyone wants to come out and get pretty photos, but a lot of times we just see the butt of the manta ray as it swims away from you. Or this is back when they were dumping Lake Okeechobee and you have to swim in this toxic green algae, which is not fun. So yeah, we always make everything look a lot prettier on social media than it is in real life. So some of the results of our study, we've identified, that actually should say, I just fixed that, 65 individuals and had about 155 encounters. And we see about half males and half females. It's about equal proportion. And which one of the cool thing is we're seeing the same individuals over and over and over again, which is really fun because we actually get to know these manta rays' personality. This one on the left is a manta ray named Jigsaw. You can see he has 2 big black dots with the little one that kind of fits in. And you can see this one down here has the same spot pattern. This one in the middle is a manta ray named Gilly, who we've seen 23 times over 3 years. So I can jump in the water and I don't even need a photo these days. I know exactly who Gilly is. And we last saw him in October of 2019. So I'm very curious to see if we'll see him this year. It'll be an important piece of data. But we see about almost half of them, we see them again. So some of them we see them once and then never again, but about half we see more than once. We also saw that all the males were sexually immature. So they all had those really small claspers, which means they're all juveniles. The females, it's a little harder to tell, but we didn't see any signs of them mating or pregnant, and they're all of a size that would indicate they're immature. We sometimes see them feeding about a quarter of the time. So to see if they're feeding, you'll see those fins unrolled and then they open their mouth and their gills really wide. And sometimes they feed on the surface. Sometimes like this manta, they feed right along the seafloor. But most of the time what we see them doing is just traveling. They're just swimming along in shallow water and usually just going in one direction. We also see a lot of human and manta ray interactions, and about a quarter of the time when we're seeing manta rays, we're seeing them very close to an inlet or a fishing pier. And 27% of our manta rays we found entangled in fishing line, which is kind of sad. We talked about some of the problems that entanglement can have. And some can be more severe. This manta at the top actually he has 2 pieces of fishing line on him, and one was strung all the way through his gills and had a plastic bag attached to it at the end. If you look at this manta ray on the right, if you look at her bottom fin, you can see how the fishing line, when it gets wrapped around them, because they'll feed by doing these loops, so the fishing line can get wrapped around them really tight and make these really cuts into the side of their body. And this manta right here actually has her cephalic fin almost completely broken off by fishing line, which is definitely going to impact her ability to feed. So they can cause some pretty nasty injuries. And we're currently working with fishermen to understand these impacts and help reduce them. Here's a video of me and one of my favorite manta rays named Stevie Nicks. And like I told you, manta rays, they're really smart. And this manta ray spent an hour swimming in slow circles below me and allowing me to cut off all this fishing line. Like, she can definitely swim away from me if she wants. But it took me a long time because this line was made of wire, so it was very difficult to cut through. I was just a little bit excited. That was a lot of free diving for me. Okay, and now we're going to talk about boat strikes. If anyone is a little queasy or something, don't look at this next photo. But we do see manta rays hit by boats, and this is one of our most severe ones. This is our manta named Gilly, who we see a lot. And we found him like this one day. So this deep cut that's coming across here is from the skeg, or the bottom of an engine. And then the ones on the side are the propeller marks. It's kind of a clear sign of a boat injury. And if you actually look underneath that injury on the scars, you can see it looks like he was hit by another one at some point. But what's really cool is manta rays have these amazing abilities to heal. So I was horrified when I saw this. So this is August 15th, 2018. We saw him 4 days later, and this is what the injury looked like. So if you guys want to go back, it looked like this, and then 4 days later, it looked like this. So they can heal really, really quickly. And now it's completely covered up, and you can barely even tell that it's there.
Wow.
Which means that, you know, we're probably way underestimating the amount this happens, because if you don't see it, they're healing in weeks. And the scars can be very light and difficult to see. So I bet this is happening way more than we're actually documenting. This is another one of our mantas named Rosa, who had a boat strike. You can actually see all the way through one of her pectoral fins. And then we saw her 6 weeks later, and it was completely healed. If you're wondering how these boat strikes are happening, these manta rays are existing in South Florida, along with a lot of people, and we actually see a lot of manta rays hanging around and inside inlets, which is about the worst place you can be if you're a manta. And we filmed them with our drone and watch so many boats go over top of them. So we're going to also be working with boaters to try to get them to become more aware and keep an eye out for manta rays. And so what all this means, the big result of our research thus far is that this is probably a manta ray nursery ground. And this is what our paper that's coming out is on. So a nursery ground is a place where you have mostly juveniles, and that they use over and over again over long periods of time as a place to safely develop into adulthood. So this is likely a really important habitat for manta rays. And manta rays were recently listed on the Endangered Species Act. They were listed as threatened on the Endangered Species Act in 2018. But the government doesn't have enough data to designate any critical habitat. So we are working with the government to collect data so that we can inform where these important habitats are, where they need to be protected. This is just a fun drone video of two mantas feeding together. When we talk about manta rays being smart, I love watching the way they synchronize their swimming. It is so cool. Boom, turn right at the same time. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about our research, we're on Facebook at Marine Megafauna Foundation Americas. We have 3 big study regions, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the Americas. We're also on Instagram at Marine Megafauna. If you like drone footage of manta rays, follow me at Florida Manta Girl, because I am always out with my drone. You can go to our website, marinemegafauna.org, and sign up. We have like a monthly newsletter that comes out that'll tell you about our research all over the world.
Are you on YouTube?
Yes, there is a YouTube channel for Marine Megafauna Foundation. I think just look on YouTube, Marine Megafauna Foundation. And big thanks to all our collaborators and our funding organizations. and all of our amazing volunteers that help us with this work. And thank you guys. And I have a drone video to play. This is a time where I saw 7 manta rays feeding. This is really sped up because it's like 10 minutes long if it's in real time. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening.
Very cool. Thank you so much. I think we do have some questions in the chat. Ooh. Do you have a question, Erin?
Yes. How do manta rays sleep?
So they don't really sleep. Do you remember when I showed that video of them in the inlet?
Mm-hmm.
So what I think they'll do a lot of times is they'll find a current. So they can find a current and face into the current and use that current to kind of let them swim in place so that the current is moving water over their gills and they don't have to actively swim as much. But yeah, but they don't really sleep like we do.
Let's see. Can you see the chat or do you want me to read off the questions for you?
I don't have it up.
That's fine. We had a couple throughout the program, I think. Let me see. Can mantas swim upside down?
Yeah, so we showed that video of them flipping upside down to get a better look at us. And that just seems to be a way for them to check things out, other than when they're feeding and they'll do these looping things. But other than that, they're not really doing it to move anywhere.
How big have you ever seen a manta ray?
How big?
Yeah.
So here in Florida, they're all pretty small, but all manta rays are big. So here, the biggest one I've probably seen is probably about 12 feet across. But when I've been diving in other places, I've seen them probably the max I've seen is about 15 feet across. Actually, no, I've seen bigger, like 17 feet. I've seen the one in the Georgia Aquarium. I've been diving there, and that one's huge.
Cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Someone asked, where did you say the tornadoes of manta is located? Is that the type of thing you see in Florida? Like those
Oh,
big
no, I wish. No, that's in a special place called Hanafaru in the Maldives. And it has to do with like their monsoon seasons when there's a lot of food in one place and all these mantas will get together. But yeah, if you want to see that, go to the Maldives. It's a very popular tourist location now.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So what do the manta rays do like if there's like a tornado or a storm?
That is
in
a
the water.
great question. So
Or
actually,
lightning.
we had satellite tags on manta rays during the big hurricane last year. And what they did is they swam far offshore and made really deep dives. I think they were, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think they were like 600 feet. So they dove really deep. So they can just dive deep to get away from things like that.
Someone asked, how do manta rays get so smart?
That's a great question. It's probably because it helps them survive. Having a big brain requires a lot of energy to provide it with. So they wouldn't have it unless it helped them survive. So since they are feeding with other manta rays, this helps them feed better, which helps them live longer, which helps them make more babies. I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. But yeah, so that's why any characteristics that animals have, it's going to help them live longer.
Where in Florida do you see the most manta rays?
That's a good question. So usually we're seeing them in very shallow water. The scuba divers very rarely see them on the reefs. So the reefs here in Florida are dove by people, you know, every day, multiple times a day, but people very rarely see manta rays on them. I'm usually seeing them. You're more likely to see a manta ray walking down the beach than scuba diving on a reef. And I see quite a lot in Boynton Beach area, also up in Jupiter. But near the inlets, I think there's something about the inlets, the outflow of water. Sometimes you'll see them feeding there, and that's what's happening in this video that's going on in the background, is they're all gathered there feeding.
Dylan wants to know, how many manta rays have you ever seen?
So here we've seen, I've seen 65 individuals about 150 times. And I've seen some in some other countries, but it's never enough. I would want to see more always.
Do you think any of the local mantas recognize you or your team?
That's a great question. The answer is, I don't know. There are some people who've done research in the Pacific, Mexico, who swear that mantas can identify individual divers. I mean, I think I would like to think that, but I have no scientific evidence of it.
And Dylan, do you have a question, hon? I think you're unmuted. Yes, no? That's fine. If you have one, just shout it out. Someone wants to know, do you have a general idea of the home range or migration patterns of the local mantas?
So this is something we're trying to figure out right now. And I think it probably varies a lot between individuals, but we did put satellite tags on last year. We were supposed to put more on this year, but the pandemic got in the way. But we found that they were using the whole entire coast of Florida, which I was actually a little surprised by. So they're traveling hundreds of miles. So what is making them do these travel? Is it temperature? Is it food? I don't know. We're just learning about them and getting to answer all these questions. But hopefully in maybe 5 years, 10 years, I'll have all these answers for everybody.
Has anyone studied their healing mechanism, and can mantas regenerate?
Yes, so that is a fantastic question. So some people have studied healing, not so much in manta rays, but in other sharks. I need to read more on this, because I got a very hard question about this in one of my last presentations. But it could have something to do with their genetics. It could have something to do with manta's skin is like covered in mucus. So maybe they have like lots of good bacteria in this mucus that helps them heal. No, if you want to do a master's or PhD on that, I think it's wide open. Basically, so far what's known about manta healing is that that they heal very rapidly. And can they regenerate? No, like their skin can grow back, like our skin is going to close over a wound, but we see quite a few mantas that lose their tails, probably because of boating incidences, or possibly shark bites, but they do not grow them back.
And did you have a question, Erin? I think I saw your hand.
So what happens to the baby manta rays once they are born?
So yeah, so once they're born, remember we talked about they're really big. So manta rays, once they're born from their mother, they are on their own. Their mom does not take care of them. She spent a year carrying them around, and they're big and they're on their own. But what they do once they're born, it's very rare to find habitats like this where you see only juveniles. There's only like a few other places in the world that are like this. So we are still learning a lot about what these baby manta rays are doing. So that's a good question that you could help me study sometime, maybe.
So what also happens is, what if there is a shark, and and then there's a baby manta ray by the shark?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So probably what happens, what we think, is that baby manta rays, the moms are probably choosing to have their manta rays in places where there's not a lot of sharks. But we don't see a lot of shark bites on our mantas. But in some populations, they see lots of shark bites. But what usually happens is the manta will be swimming along and the shark will come up from behind and take a bite out. So as long as it doesn't get into the body cavity where all the organs are, the mantas usually can survive those. But like I said before, manta rays sink and they're made of cartilage. So if sharks are attacking them and they're dying, we're probably not seeing that. So it's a really hard thing to know about. But yes, there could be sharks attacking manta rays, but still they're pretty big. So it's going to need to be pretty big, pretty large sharks to do that.
How do manta rays survive tsunamis?
Tsunamis, well, it's probably very similar to what they do during hurricanes. They can probably feel it coming due to like pressure changes or plate movements, and they'll swim offshore and go out into deeper water where it won't affect them.
We had someone
Thank you.
ask, oops, sorry. We had someone ask if they were able to research their intelligence and like actually quantify it.
Yes, so one kind of classic study of animal intelligence or consciousness is what they call a mirror recognition test. So they will put, say, a mark on a monkey's face, and if the monkey looks in the mirror and points to the mark, he's recognizing himself in the mirror and not thinking it's like a whole nother monkey that's there. So they tried to do this with manta rays at an aquarium in the Bahamas. They basically put a big mirror in their tank and looked at the difference between how the mantas interacted with the mirrors and how they interacted on their own. And they did find that manta rays were doing different behaviors in front of the mirrors, but I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done on it. So I mean, it's a very ripe area. It's a lot harder to do these studies with things that are underwater and don't have they've done it with elephants and crows, but I mean, you can't really mark a manta ray underwater and then, I don't know. But there's also been one of our MMF researchers in Indonesia recently did a big study and found out that females make long-term bonds. So that female manta rays are seen together over years and years and years. So that's a measure of social intelligence.
That's awesome. We had Julianne ask, what are some of the next questions you'd like answered with the research? And is there a good email to get in contact about research collaborations?
Yes, I will type my email in the chat box right now. Yeah, so we have a lot of stuff. I mean, a feeding ecology study is something I hope to be on the list. Like what are they feeding on here in Florida? Also, there's a population of manta rays in Central Florida, and we just put a grant in for this. That's mostly adults, and they can be by the hundreds there. And fishermen know about this aggregation and use the mantas to find cobia. So the cobia are this fish that fishermen really like, and they'll swim either below or on top of the manta rays, and the fishermen will cast at the manta rays to catch the cobia. So we want to look more into that fishery and also try to see if those adult manta rays are related to our baby manta rays down there, doing a genetic study.
Do manta rays have hearts?
Yes, they do.
Oh, I lost where I was in the chat. Let's see. What do manta rays fall prey to? What are their enemies?
Yeah, so manta rays are really big, so they don't have a lot of things that can eat them. It's basically going to be large sharks. There has been a documentation of an orca eating a manta ray. Orcas are the kings of the ocean. And then unfortunately, us humans.
I thought whales were the king of oceans.
Well, I mean, it depends on how you quantify the king of the ocean. But orcas will eat almost anything, including great white sharks.
Where in the world can you see mantas most often?
So there's a lot of places, like here in Florida, like I said, a lot of the mantas we see are traveling. So we're seeing them in really low population densities, which is why I think they went overlooked for so long, because people are probably just seeing them and being like, oh, it's a rare occurrence. But places where they congregate to feed or where they congregate to clean, there'll be places on the reef where they get cleaned by little cleaner fish. But out in Hawaii, there's quite a few places. There's a big dive industry where you can night snorkel with mantas in Hawaii. The Maldives, Australia, French Polynesia, Indonesia, all the pretty tropical places have good mantas. But yeah, if you Google like where to dive with mantas, there's lots of websites that'll give you like the top 10 places. Actually, right now in Mexico, off the Caribbean of Mexico in July and August, there's a big aggregation of whale sharks and manta rays. So it's really close by, and it's just always, I haven't been there because it's in the middle of our field season here.
Erin, you have a question? You can unmute yourself.
So I have actually seen a manta ray when I went on vacation. So like there was like this manta ray injured. There was like this manta ray injured because he had like this like long like rip like on the side of his fin, and like
Oh no, where was that?
so we were going on this vacation. So we were at this type of beach. And then we found this manta ray, which we went actually to Cayman Islands, and then we saw one when we got on the boat on our last stop to see some starfish. We saw a manta ray next to the boat. Then there was like a rip on the side of its fin.
And yeah, and those rips are most often caused by fishing line, probably. That's really cool.
Okay.
And another thing for people who are out on the water is like, this is the first study of manta rays in Florida. So we're always looking for information. So if you ever see one, snap a photo and send it to either my email or our Facebook page, any way you can find us. But like I send all of that data goes straight to the federal government to help us plan on how
Well, I think my mom actually might have took a picture of it.
What?
Well, I think my mom might have actually took a picture of it.
Oh, well, then you can send it to me.
Okay.
Very cool. Yeah, her email's in the chat. You could definitely send that on to her. I actually have a question. If you find a tangled or injured manta, is there a number you should call? Is there someone that could help them?
So there's not really, like for turtles who have to come up to breathe. I mean, if you can cut off the line yourself, if you have like some scissors or shears and freediving gear, you'll know if the manta will let you do it. They'll either swim away or they'll let you. But no, there isn't, because you can't, there's no like rehab places. You can't take a manta ray to a rehab place like you could take a turtle. So no, hopefully a lot of times it will fall off. But yeah, so that's why we're really trying to work to reduce the interactions.
And then I think our last question, what is their lifespan?
That's a great question. We don't necessarily know. Probably around 40 to 50 years. I think The longest place they've tracked an individual manta is in Australia, I think, for like 40 years. But the problem is, since we don't see the babies a lot, they don't know, like, we need to see that baby spot pattern and then track it through its whole lifetime. But right now, the best guess is like 40 to 50 years.
Awesome. Very cool.
How many manta rays are caught in string fishing string?
How many manta rays are? So we found about 25% of the manta rays we see here in Florida have been caught in fishing line. Yeah, and I see someone else is asking a question about mantas liking warm water. They actually, yes, they are found in a lot of tropical places. There's 2 different species, which I didn't get into. But one species, the giant manta ray, they can go into temperate waters and they can make deep dives into cold waters. And they're seen off of like the coast of New England and stuff. But yeah, they actually have this like counter current heat exchanger around their brain. So their brain can stay way warmer than the ambient water temperature. So yes, mostly they are found in warm waters, but not exclusively.
You.
Ah, let me see.
Oh, that's an awesome picture. I think he just ran off.
Yeah.
But does anyone else? There we go.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, why don't you send that to me?
Well, I actually don't know how to send it to you, but I do have the picture.
My email is in the chat if you can get your mom to help you. That's actually really cool. Yeah, we don't know that many places in the Caribbean other than Mexico where they can be reliably seen. They seem to just be seen like here and there, kind of like occasionally. So I'm always interested in Caribbean sightings.
Very nice. Well, if you missed the beginning of this, or if you missed the email, we will post this all to our YouTube page. So if you are trying to send that to her and you can't remember the email, if you didn't get it written down, we'll link it in. Otherwise, if you think of any other questions, this was really, really cool. We got a lot of really great questions. But if you think of any after it, feel free to email us at meek@nova.edu. Even if you email us the picture, we will try and get it straight over to Jessica.
Or put it on our Facebook page too, maybe.
Yes, we could post it on Facebook and share it with everyone. So feel free to email us. Otherwise, if you missed the beginning, it is getting posted to YouTube. And this Thursday, we're actually talking to, I think it's Chelsea on Thursday, talking all about our octopi friends, octopus
I'm
friends.
diving with Chelsea tomorrow.
Oh, cool. Very cool. But otherwise, thank you very much for coming, guys. And thank you so, so much, Jessica. Today was super cool. We will definitely.
Guys, that was really good questions.
Yeah, we'll definitely post it up. So thank you. We'll see you guys on Thursday, hopefully. Thursday at 1 to learn about octopus.